Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunlitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschyat Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna. So welcome back to Wisdom of Bhagavad Gita after a break of 2 weeks. Um, Last week we were celebrating appearance day of Lord Narasimhadev, so we couldn't have the program. And the week before, because of some other service, I couldn't take it. But we are back, and we are currently have finished chapter 7. So we are going to start chapter 8 today. So chapter 8 is called Attaining the Supreme. And in Sanskrit, this chapter is called Akshara Brahma Yoga. This chapter has 28 verses. So it's a smallish chapter. It is not a very big chapter. So 28 verses are there. And in this series that we are looking at, which is the Bhakti Yoga section of Bhagavad Gita, which is starting from chapter 7, goes till chapter 12. So this is the second chapter in that series or in that section. So this is the second chapter in the Bhakti Yoga section. So in chapter 7, in the last two verses, if you remember, when we were talking about it, there were few interesting terms that Lord Shri Krishna mentioned. So in verse number 29 of 7th chapter, Lord Shri Krishna talked about Brahma, Adhyatma, and Karma. And then in verse number 30, which is the last verse of last 7th chapter, he talked about Adi Bhuta, Adi Daiva, Adi Yajna, and he also talked about Prayana Kala, at the time of death. So hearing these terminologies or some complicated words, Adi Bhuta, Adi Daiva, Adi Yajna, and then earlier he talked about Adhyatma, Karma, Brahma, and also talked about that at the time of death, what happens. So hearing all of that, then Arjuna is asking few questions at the beginning of chapter 8. So first two verses in chapter 8, Arjuna asked total 8 questions to Krishna, one after another, one after another. And it's quite amazing. Like if someone is asking me any question after the lecture or during the lecture, and if they say that, Prabhuji, I have 2 questions, I said one at a time. Because if I hear the second question, I'll just focus on it and I'll forget the first question by the time that you have talked about it. But here, Arjuna, one after another, he asked total 8 questions. And amazingly, what Lord Shri Krishna does is in 2 verses, he answers 7 questions. Out of those 8 questions, the first 7 questions he answers in just 2 verses, verse number 3 and 4. And then most of the remaining chapter, he focuses on the last question, how to remember Krishna at the time of death. And while answering that question, he also talks about Yoga Mishra Bhakti, which is the devotional service, but it is mixed with Ashtanga Yoga, which was mentioned in chapter 6 earlier. And then he also talks about pure devotional service. And at the time of death, what are the factors which affects the destination? So he talks various different things, but mainly he's still talking about the last question, which is how to remember Krishna at the time of death. So this is how the chapter 8 is going to flow. And I'm thinking that we possibly will take only 2 sessions for chapter 8. So we'll try to cover around half of the verses today and then remaining half in the next session. So let us start. So first verse we will start with Attaining the Supreme, chapter 8, Arjuna Vacha. Kim tad brahma kim adhyatmam kim karma purushottama adibhutam cha kim proktam adidaivam kim uchyate. Who wants to read? Yes, Anjali Mataji, please go ahead.
Arjuna inquired, O my lord, O supreme person, what a Brahmin? What is the self? What are fruitative activities? What is this material manifestation? And what are the demigods? Please explain this to me.
Yes, thank you, Mataji. So 5 questions have been asked in this first verse. What is he saying? What is Brahman? What is the self? What are fruitive activities? What is this material manifestation? And what are the demigods? So basically, Brahma, Adhyatma, Karma, Adibhuta, and Adidaiva. These 5 things have been asked. What are these 5 things? That is what Arjuna has asked in first question. And he refers to the Supreme Lord as Purushottama. So Srila Prabhupada explains what is the significance of calling the Lord Purushottama in this verse. So let us read the last paragraph, which is actually 2 paragraphs only in the purport. So the second paragraph, where he says Arjuna has addressed. Paminder Prabhuji, you had raised your hand earlier, so you can read that small paragraph.
Arjuna has addressed the Supreme Lord as Purushottama, the Supreme Person, which means that he was putting these questions not simply to a friend, but to the Supreme Person, knowing him to be the supreme authority, able to give definite answers.
Thank you. Thank you, Prabhuji. So it is not a question that he has asked to his friend. He's saying specifically Purushottama, Supreme Person, because he knows that all the knowledge is coming from the Supreme Lord. And who can then answer his questions if not the Supreme Lord? And he can give definitive answer. It is not that I think that this is the answer. No, he's not, I think. He can give you a definitive answer. He's not thinking about that this is true or that may be also true, but I don't know. I'm just speculating. I'm trying to give you some answer. No. He's the Supreme Lord. He will give definitive answer. No one else can be as definitive as the Supreme Lord. That is why he is asking these questions to Lord Shri Krishna. Let us see some more questions and then we will talk a little bit more about these questions. So verse number 2. Adiyajna katham kotra dehesmin madhusudana prayana cha katham neyosi niyatatmabhi. Yes, Vibhor Prabhuji. And then Vidushi Mataji, you can do the next one.
Who is the Lord of sacrifice? And how does he live in the body? O Madhusudana, and how can those engaged in devotional service know you at the time of the death? Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. So more questions are coming here. What is he saying? Who's the Lord of sacrifice? So Adhiyajna. Who's Adhiyajna? And how does he live in the body? Like where exactly is he located in the body? And how can those engaged in devotional service know you at the time of death? So this is the most important question that Arjuna has asked in these 8 questions. And that is how proportionately Lord Shri Krishna also spends the time in answering these. So 7 questions he answers in just 2 verses, verse number 3 and 4. And then he will elaborately talk about how to remember Krishna at the time of death. Again, interestingly, earlier in the question, earlier in the verse, Arjuna referred to Lord as Purushottama. And here he's talking about Madhusudana. And Srila Prabhupada again elaborates on what is the significance of calling Madhusudana in this verse. So it is in the again second para. Vidushi Mataji, you can read that second para.
Arjuna addresses the Lord as Madhusudana because Krishna once killed a demon named Madhu. Actually, these questions, which are of the nature of doubts, should not have arisen in the mind of Arjuna because Arjuna is a Krishna conscious devotee. Therefore, these doubts are like demons. Since Krishna is so expert in killing demons, Arjuna here addresses him as Madhusudana so that Krishna might kill the demonic doubts that arise in Arjuna's mind.
Yeah, thank you very much. So the doubts are compared to demons. So we have so many doubts. That means we have so many demons inside us. And if we do not take help from somebody to clear these doubts or to kill these demons which are in our mind, then those demons will kill our bhakti. Because the doubt will just take us in different directions. Because our mind, we know, it is like any question that comes in the mind, it is like a balloon. And the more time that doubt remains inside the mind, the balloon becomes bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So it is better to actually kill that doubt as soon as it arises by asking someone who can clarify that doubt. If you keep that in our mind, it will just become bigger and bigger, and then we will lose the faith in the process or in a particular thing that you have the doubt about. And that is why Arjuna is asking and calling Krishna as Madhusudana. Just like you killed the demon, Madhu, you kill all these doubts that I have in my mind. And that is how I'll be free from the doubt. So here, 8 questions are asked by Arjuna. What is Brahman? What is Adhyatma? What is Karma? What is Adibhuta? What is Adidaiva? What is Adhiyajna? Where does Adhiyajna reside? And how to remember Krishna at the time of death. So all these 8 questions, now we will start looking at the answers. And then let's read verse number 3 and 4, and then we will talk about these 7 answers that Krishna has given. Shri Bhagavan Aksharam Brahma Paramam Swabhavodhyatmayuchyate Bhuta Bhavot Bhavakaro Visarga Karma Samnityaha. Who's next? Yes, Margi Mataji, please go ahead.
Say, the indestructible, transcendental living entity is called Brahman, and his eternal nature is called Adhyatma, the self. Action pertaining to the development of the material body of the living entities is called karma, or fruitive activities. Hare Krishna.
Okay. Thank you, Mataji. Your voice was quite faint, but I hope everyone has a book in front and you have read it along with Mataji. So 3 questions have been answered. What is Brahman? What is Adhyatma? And also what is karma? But let's read the next one as well, and then we will come back and talk about these answers. Text number 4. Adhibhutam ksharo bhavaha purushascha adidaivatam adhiyajnyohamevatra dehe deha bhrutamvara. Yes, Nimi Mataji, please go ahead.
Hare Krishna. O best of the embodied beings, the physical nature, which is constantly changing, is called Adhibhuta, the material manifestation. The universal form of the Lord, which includes all the demigods, like those of the sun and moon, is called Adhidaiva. And I, the Supreme Lord, represented as Super Soul in the heart of every embodied being, am called Adhiyagna, the Lord of Sacrifice.
Yes, thank you. So, what is Brahman? First question, Lord Shri Krishna is saying. And when Arjuna is asking this question, what is Brahman? So he is asking, what is the spirit that you are talking about? Are you referring to the Jiva or to the Paramatma, basically? So Lord Shri Krishna answers, Brahman is the indestructible living entity. And the Supreme Lord is also Brahman, but he's Parabrahman. Parabrahman is he's bigger than Brahman, he's Parabrahman, he's beyond Brahman. So he's the Supreme Lord. But in a way, if you see, both are indestructible, both are spiritual. That is why sometimes in the scriptures, both are referred to as Brahman. But here, specifically in this context, Lord is saying that Brahman is the spirit. It is the indestructible living entity. So all of us are referred to as Brahman. What is Adhyatma? Adhyatma means what is the nature of this jiva? So immediately he says Swabhava. Swabhava means our eternal nature, which is to serve the Supreme Lord. So Adhyatma means to serve the Supreme Lord. What is our eternal nature? So Jivera Swarupa hai Krishnera Nityadas. Krishnera Tatastha Shakti Bheda Bhed Prakash. So it is mentioned in Chaitanya Charitamrita. What is the nature of the Jiva? So Jivera Swarupa hai Krishnera Nityadas. We are eternal servant of the Supreme Lord, and that is our eternal nature. That is our Swabhava. And that is why it is Adhyatma. So in India, especially many people say that, oh, I'm following the path of Adhyatma. So here Krishna is answering what exactly is Adhyatma. If someone asks you, what is the Adhyatma? So here it is mentioned. What is Adhyatma? Adhyatma means to serve the Supreme Lord. So if you are following a path of Adhyatma, and if you are not serving the Supreme Lord, then you are not on the right path. You are not following Adhyatma. So Krishna is saying Brahman means the Jiva, indestructible living entities, and Adhyatma is their eternal nature, which is to serve the Supreme Lord. Now, the third question answered is quite interesting. Karma, what is karma? And that can be answered in different ways. But Krishna has made it so simple. He's saying that any activity that you do which creates a body, material body, that is karma. So if you're doing any particular activity which is creating a material body for yourself, like the next material body is getting created by that activity is called karma. Isn't that very easy? So karma, because karma can be referred to as actually material activity or spiritual activity. But the spiritual activity doesn't create material body. In fact, it frees us from the material body. So that is not the karma that Krishna is referring to here. It is the material activities that we are doing. We have all these hundreds of material desires by which we are creating uh, the reactions. And because of those reactions, we have to take the next body. And any such activity is referred to as karma. So the activity which generates this material body is karma. Then the next question was, what is Adibhuta? Adibhuta means what is this material manifestation? So are we referring to this like things like pots or this cupboard? Or are we referring to the material bodies? So what exactly do you mean by when you say Adibhuta? That is the question that Arjuna asked. And Krishna says that this physical nature, which is constantly changing, that is Adibhuta. And in the purport of verse number 4, Adibhuta was answered where? Adibhuta, yeah. In the next verse, like verse number 4, Srila Prabhupada mentions that this material body keeps changing and it undergoes through 6 changes. And what are the six changes that they go through? Any material body? The material body is born, then it grows, then it remains for some duration, it produces some offspring, then it dwindles, and then it dies. So these are the 6 changes which are happening in the material body. So this physical manifestation or this physical nature which undergoes these changes, these constant changes which are going through, that is called Adibhuta. Basically, the body is Adibhuta, is referred to as Adibhuta. Then the next question is, what is Adidaiva? Adidaiva means, so Arjuna is asking, are you referring to the Devatas, the demigods? Or are you referring to the universal form when you are referring to Adidaiva? So Lord Shri Krishna answers in that 4th verse that we just read. He's saying that the universal form, which includes all the devatas, all the demigods are included, and including their different planets as well. So universal form is Adidaiva. Then what is Adhiyajna? Adhiyajna means who's the enjoyer of the sacrifices. So he has already answered that earlier at the end of 5th chapter. What is Adhiyajna? Who is the enjoyer of all sacrifices? But still, because this term wasn't used, Adhiyajna, so now that is why Arjuna has already, again asked this question. And Krishna says simple, I am the Adhiyajna. So here specifically he talks about that the Paramatma in every living entity's heart. So he answers both this question, 6 and 7. Where does Adhiyajna reside? In everyone's heart. Adhiyajna resides because that is Paramatma. And what is Adhiyajna? It is Paramatma. So is that clear? Brahman is living entity. Adhyatma is our eternal nature, is to serve Krishna. Karma means anything that creates material body, any activity, that is karma. Adibhuta means this body, which is always changing. Adidaiva means universal form, which includes all the devatas, including their planets. Adhiyajna means the Paramatma. And where does it stay? In the heart. It may seem complicated, but if you actually look at it, these are just some technical terms for all the things that we already know about. We have already talked about the body. We have already talked about the soul. We have already talked about the Supreme Lord. We have talked about, probably we haven't talked about universal form yet, but don't worry, we have an entire chapter on universal form, which is coming soon. So we will talk about universal form as well. And then we have talked about material nature. We have talked a little bit about karma as well. And so all of these terms which we had talked about are again mentioned in a very different, in a different way. Parminder Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. So when you said that Brahman is a living entity, but it's also described, like once you described it as like 3 forms of Lord as well.
Yeah, that's correct. So as I was mentioning, Brahman or Brahma is, it is referring to spirit or spiritual. And as I was mentioning, as describing earlier, it can actually refer to the spirit soul as well as the Supreme Lord. But here in this context, the Brahma is actually referred to as to the Jiva. And as in comparison to the Jiva, the Supreme Lord in that context is referred to as Parabrahma. And Srila Prabhupada explains that in the purport, that there's a difference between Brahma and Parabrahma. So, but when we talk about the 3 manifestations or 3 realizations of the Absolute, which is Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan, there that Brahman is referring to the Supreme Lord or the Absolute Truth. In Sanskrit, one word can have multiple meanings, and we need to actually know the context and apply that properly. And because it is so complicated, that is why we require Srila Prabhupada's as it is Bhagavad Gita to understand it.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. If there is no question, then we can move ahead further. Is that okay? Okay. So 7 questions have been answered, but the last one is still remaining. How to remember Krishna at the time of death? So that is going to get answered now in the especially the entire chapter, but especially now verse number 5 to 8. It will be answered, and then it will be elaborated a little later. But let us see the learning from these things that we have already seen, the answers to 7 questions. So what we can learn from this? So we are spirit souls, and our eternal nature is to serve the Supreme Lord. But when we utilize that nature to serve ourselves or our extended self, me and mine, then that is called karma, which leads to creation of our physical bodies. So our eternal nature is actually supposed to serve the Lord. But when we actually utilize that to serve ourselves somehow or the other, then we create more material bodies. So simple learning that we have from here is we have to stop serving ourselves and start serving the Supreme Lord. So start serving the Supreme Lord more and more. And that is how we can progress back to Krishna, towards the Supreme Lord. So this is the important learning. And all of these, or most of the terms that we talked about, are here. So when we are saying we are spirit souls, that means we are Brahman. And our eternal nature is Adhyatma. And what is that? To serve the Supreme Lord. Who is the Supreme Lord? Supreme Lord is Adhyajna. But when we utilize that to serve ourselves, then that is called karma, which is the karma that we talked about. And that leads to creation of the physical bodies. Physical body is nothing but Adibhuta. So this is how all these terms, which we have already seen, but now it will start making sense. Okay. So let's move to the next verse. It's a very famous verse. This Anta Kale Chamameva. Srila Prabhupada has quoted it hundreds of times. So let us read verse number 5. Antakale च मामेव स्मरणमुक्त्वा कलेवरं यः प्रयाति समद्भावं याति नास्तत्र संशयः. Yes, Uma Mataji.
And whoever at the end of his life quits his body, remembering me alone, at once attains my nature. Of this there is no doubt.
Yeah, thank you, Mataji. So this is a very famous verse. Antakale cha mameva smarana muktva kalevaram. So at the time of death, Antakale cha mameva. So at the time of death, mameva smarana muktva. So we have to, if someone leaves the body, remembering Krishna alone, like only Krishna needs to be remembered, then yap prayati samadbhavam yati nastatra samshaya. So if that happens, then you will come back to me. Of this, there is no doubt at all. That is what Krishna is saying. So asamshaya, there is no doubt at all, he's saying. So as it is shown in this picture, if someone is leaving his body thinking about Krishna, Krishna's pastime, then he will surely go back to Godhead. So Srila Prabhupada actually explains in the purport very nicely that how it is possible to remember the Supreme Lord at the time of death. Remembrance of Krishna, it is in the mid of that purport where he says, remembrance of Krishna is not possible for the impure soul who has not practiced Krishna consciousness in devotional service. Therefore, one should practice Krishna consciousness from the very beginning of life. If one wants to achieve success at the end of his life, the process of remembering Krishna is essential. Therefore, one should constantly, incessantly chant the Mahamantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And then again, after a few lines, again he quotes the full Mahamantra. Then you go to the 6th verse, and again he quotes the full Mahamantra, saying that we have to chant it. So in these two verses, Srila Prabhupada is emphasizing that how we can remember Krishna at the time of death. He's saying that if you haven't remembered or if you haven't practiced chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra during your life, how is it possible that you can remember Krishna at the end of your life? You can't think of cheating Krishna, thinking that, hey, simple solution. I can enjoy materially whole of my life. Krishna has said that Antakale cha mamevo. Only I have to remember Krishna at the time of death. So somehow or the other, I will just cheat Krishna, that I will do all the other things whole of my life. And somehow or the other, I'll just remember Krishna at the time of death. If you think like that, forget it. Krishna is a bigger cheater than you. He will definitely cheat you at the time of death. If you think that you can cheat him, it is not going to be possible. So this is a special situation or special case that he has given in verse number 5. That at the time of death, if you remember me, Krishna is saying, then you will come to me. But what if you are remembering something else? then he actually answers in the next verse. So, but before we actually think about the time of death, why Krishna is actually emphasizing of remembering him at the time of death? Why does he not say just that whatever, forget about the time of death, just whatever you are doing at the end, whole of life, and then based on that I will decide. He gives little bit like that in the 7th verse, but why he is emphasizing so much about the time of death? So the reason is the time of death is like that junction. When you you are driving in a particular direction, and then suddenly there is a junction that comes. If you go left, then you will go in different direction, and if you take the right road, then you will go into a different place. So death is also like that junction. If you at the time of death, if you take a particular direction, then you will end up differently. And if you take a different road or different consciousness that you have at that point, then you can you can get a different result. And during the life, you can actually prepare, you can think about it, you can plan about it, what you want to do, and that way it will help, like whatever you have done during the life. But still, at the end of death, you have to remember Krishna. So it is at that point is very important because it's a junction. You can either become a human being again, or you can go down to animal life, or you can even go back to Godhead. So many different options are possible. So that is why that junction is not like two-way. It has 84 million paths, 8.4 million paths which are there at that junction. And depending on the path that you take, you can actually end up into different place. And at the time of death, it is like the house is on fire. So when, say, suppose our house is on fire, then it is not that we say that, oh, my fridge is so important, and you carry your fridge on your back and you try to save your fridge. No. What you try to do at the time of such a critical time when the house is on fire, you will try to actually save what is the most important thing. All the people in the house, you'll try to save them first. If you have more time, then whatever little valuables that you have, you can take those, and then you try to save them. Similarly, at the time of death, this time is very critical. And at that time, you are not able to take your money with you. You can't take your house. You cannot take your car. You cannot take your clothes. You cannot take your hundreds of shoes that you may have accumulated. You cannot take your body, which you take care of it so much during the whole of your life. You cannot take anything. The only thing that you're allowed to take with yourself is any spiritual activity that you have done. The result of that activity can only be taken with you. Nothing else is possible to take with you. Of course, if you're taking another life, you also take your subtle body with you. But we are talking about the going back to Godhead. So at that time, only the spiritual things that you have done, spiritual activities, the result of those activities you can carry with you. So that is why this is a very important time. Now, after talking about what happens if you remember the Supreme Lord at the time of death, now Krishna is responding and saying, what if you remember something else? So that is verse number 6. Yam yam vapi smarana bhavam yajatyante kalevaram tam tameva iti kaunteya sada tad bhava bhavitaha. Yes, Raghavendra Prabhuji, please go ahead. And Surananda Prabhuji, you can do the next one.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Correct.
Translation. Whatever state of being one remembers, he quits his body, O son of Kunti, that state he will attain without fail.
Thank you, Prabhuji. So this is the general law at the time of death is mentioned in this verse. So whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, that state he will attain without fail. So if we are at the time of death, if we are in animal consciousness, then the next life is going to be animal birth. If we have lived like a human and we have maintained that consciousness of human, then the next life we will be a human being again. If we have advanced our consciousness to the consciousness of even devatas like demigods, then you can go to the heavenly planet and you can enjoy for some time, or you can even become a devata there. But most of the people in this Kali Yuga especially, they are living a life of a deluxe version of an animal. They are just focusing on eating, mating, sleeping, and defending. And if that is the case, then uh, their consciousness is not even at the level of human at the time of death. And generally, they will go to the animal life. And this is the subtle law. If you think about God at the time of death, then we go back to God. And if you think about the pet dog at the time of death, then we take the life of a dog in the next life. So that is why we have to be very, very careful about what kind of attachments that we are developing in this human life. If we keep developing these unnecessary attachments around us, then it is very, very hard. It is very hard for remembering Krishna at the time of death. We will just be focusing on this other attachment and we will not be able to remember Krishna at the time of death. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada gives the example of Bharat Maharaj. Now, Bharat Maharaj was a great king. He was so influential that as a king, that because of him, we got the country name as Bharata. And Bharata doesn't only actually is not only the small country that we have currently. Bharat was actually the entire Earth planet was called Bharatavarsha. And that is because of the great king Bharata. And he was not only a great king, but he was also spiritually very advanced. So even uh, he was still young at that time, he gave up his kingdom and he renounced everything and he went to the forest for progressing further spiritually. So in the youth itself, he has left the kingdom and he has gone to the forest. But then what happens? He is actually trying to progress spiritually in the forest, and he has almost come to the stage of bhava, which is just like this close to prema. We say that our goal is to reach the level of prema, the love of Godhead that we want. So he was just that close, very, very close to prema. But then something happened in his life. What happened? He saw when he was meditating one day near the river, he saw that a deer mother, she gave birth to a baby deer and she died. And of course, as a devotee, he felt compassionate towards this baby deer. And he thought that, oh, I should save this baby deer. Otherwise, some lion or tiger or fox will come and eat the baby deer. So out of that compassion, he took the baby deer home and he started taking care of the deer. But the only problem was, it was okay to be compassionate and to save, but the problem came when he became too attached to this baby deer. Now he became so attached that even when he's doing his regular sadhana that you can see in this picture, he's trying to do the sadhana, his yajna is going on, but his focus is not on the yajna. Adhiyajna is the Supreme Lord. So that means he's not now focusing on the Supreme Lord. He came to the forest to become Krishna conscious. But what has happened is, as you can see from this picture, he has become that deer conscious. And he will always be thinking that, oh, where is this deer gone? When he can't see it, he will start thinking that, oh, where is he gone? And is it possible that in the forest, while the deer is roaming, maybe a tiger will come or a lion will chase the deer and eat the deer and kill him? So he will always be thinking like this. And he will leave his sadhana and he will start searching for the deer in the forest. And when he will find the deer, only then he will feel satisfied. So, as we can see, he has become completely deer conscious. So, obviously, then at the time of death, what happened was he was still remembering this deer. And that is how, remembering this deer, he left his body. And it is said, Yam Yam Vapi Smaran Bhava Tyajatyante Kalevaram. So, whatever bhava, whatever consciousness that you have at the time of death, Krishna says that is the that is the life that you are going to get in the next birth. So, King Bharata, from whom we have got this name of Bharata, a very exalted king, a very wonderful devotee, even at the stage of bhava, has fallen down. And he has now taken the life of a deer. The next birth was a deer's birth. But the good thing was, because he has done so much devotional service, Lord Krishna protected his consciousness. And he could remember in the deer's life as well what mistake he has done in the past life. And remembering that how he has fallen down because of this attachment, in the deer's life, he made sure that he is not being attached to anything. Not only that, he would always remain close to this ashram of various different sages, and he will try to listen from them what they are talking about. So that is how, in the deer's life as well, he spent hearing Krishna Katha. And his bhakti became even more intense because he kept on remembering that how he was this close and this small mistake has led to his fall down. So he was very, very conscious of not creating any other attachment but the attachment of Krishna. So you can see that Krishna has made, even though we may think externally that, oh, Krishna did not protect him, and that from bhava level as well, he has fallen down and he has become deer. But from the overall perspective, if you see, his bhakti become even more intense. And he is now progressing further from Bharata's life to deer's life was an advanced life. From the bodily level, we see that it is a lower life, but from the consciousness level, we can see that the deer's consciousness was even higher than Bharat Maharaja's consciousness in his previous life, because he is now completely detached and only focused on hearing. So in the next life, then the deer got another life in Brahmana's. He got a Brahmana's birth, and there, as a Jada Bharata, he continued his life. And he also um, gave knowledge to another king called Rahugana, and then at the end of life, he went back to Godhead. So we can see from this example, this verse that we just read, whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, O son of Kunti, that state he will attain without fail. So this is what is mentioned, and this is exactly what we can see from Bharat Maharaja's life. So we have to take care. So we may think that I'm safe. I don't have any deer near me because there is no deer near me in Auckland or in Wellington. So I'm safe. I don't have to worry about it. But our deer is here. This one. This one is our deer. And this deer is always with us. And as you can see from this third picture that you saw, that when his sadhana was going on, he was looking at the deer. So similarly, when our chanting is going on, sometimes people actually are looking at at their phone or whatever they are actually engaged in. So that becomes our deer. So any other material desires that we keep while we are doing our sadhana, then we are getting deviated from that. And that is why it is said that we have to be attentive while chanting. We have to chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, but we have to be very, very attentive while chanting. And the more attentive that we become, more progress that we can make. So how do we do all of this? That how do we remember Krishna at the time of death? So Krishna had just given a formula that if you remember me, you will come to me. If you remember something else, then you will take different body. But finally, how do I remember? So that is mentioned in the next verse. Verse number 7. तस्मात् सर्वेषु कालेषु माम् अनुस्मरयुध्य च मय्यर्पितमनो बुद्धिर्मामे वैश्यस्य संशयः.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Therefore, Arjuna, you should always think of me in the form of Krishna and at the same time carry out your prescribed duty of fighting. With your activities dedicated to me and your mind and intelligence fixed on me, you will attain me without doubt.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Here is the formula. Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mam anusmara yuddhacha. Now, very, very important thing Krishna has mentioned. How do we remember Krishna at the time of death? So this formula is like this. We want to go back to Godhead. And that is mentioned that we can go back to Godhead in the 5th verse if you remember Krishna at the time of death. But this verse explains how to remember Krishna at the time of death. And what is it? We have to remember Krishna throughout of our life and then do our duty. Mam anusmara yuddhacha tasmat sarveshu kaleshu. All the time we have to remember Krishna and do our prescribed duty. Then we will remember Krishna at the time of death. Then we will go back to Godhead. But how do we remember Krishna throughout our life? That is also mentioned. That Maya Arpita Mano Buddhir. By offering mind and intelligence to Krishna. So we have to offer our mind and intelligence to Krishna. Then we can remember Krishna throughout our life. And then we can remember Krishna at the time of death. And then we can go back to Godhead. How do we offer our mind to Krishna? Simple. We have to chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Mantra means Manatrayate iti mantra. So mantra will liberate our mind. That is why we have to offer our mind to Krishna by engaging our mind in Krishna's mantra, Krishna's name. So that is chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra regularly. And intelligence we can offer to Krishna by studying Bhagavad Gita, by studying Srimad Bhagavatam, by studying Chaitanya Charitamrita. So the mind and intelligence we have to offer to Krishna. And that is how we can always think about Krishna. So Tasmat Sarveshu Kaleshu has mentioned. So all the time we have to do this. And interestingly, Krishna has given a sequence as well, how to remember him. Krishna doesn't say that while doing your duty, you should remember me. Krishna says, while remembering me, you can do your duty. It's different. What is the priority? Priority is doing your duty, or priority is to remember Krishna. So he said, Mam Anusmara first. Remember me and Yuddhacha. Do your duty. So this is the priority we should have in our life. Our top priority should be always remember Krishna, never forget Krishna. And then while doing that, we have to Yuddhacha. So Arjuna's duty was to do Yuddha. But here, our duty, whatever our prescribed duty is, whatever our material duty that we are doing, that we can keep doing. But always remember Krishna. And while doing that, you can do the duty. And someone will say that, but Prabhuji, it is so difficult. Even while chanting, we cannot remember Krishna. What are you talking about remembering Krishna when we are at work? It is not possible. But Krishna is saying, hey, this is very, very simple. If you cannot even achieve this, how will you remember me at the time of death, which is much more difficult to do than doing your prescribed duty? So we have to practice remembering Krishna and then do our duty. Because this is much simpler than remembering Krishna at the time of death when all our body is in a completely difficult stage. And Srila Prabhupada is referring to King Kulashekara in these verses, where he's mentioning that at the time of death, how our kapha vata pitta are in the turmoil, and it is so difficult to remember anything else. So he's saying in this prayer that now I am healthy and fine. I better die now while remembering you. So, but here the point is that it is very difficult to remember Krishna at the time of death because we are going through so much pain at the level of the body. So if we are not able to remember Krishna when everything is fine, then there is no possibility of remembering Krishna at the time of death. So we must practice it now when we are healthy and fine. If you are thinking that we will not do it now and suddenly we will remember Krishna at the time of death, it's not happening. So that is why these verses are so important in our life. That we have to remember Krishna throughout our life by chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra in the association of devotees, reading Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam in the association of devotees. We have to worship the deities in the association of devotees, and what else is it? Eat prasadam in association of devotees as well. So all of these activities, if we keep doing the five most important activities in bhakti, then we will remember Krishna throughout our life, and then it is possible that we can remember Krishna at the time of death. So this is like an exam. So we have to actually pass this exam. So whenever we go to a training institute and apply for a course, and we have to do some assignments throughout, and finally we have to give some exam, and then there are some passing marks for the exams, and depending on how we have scored, we either fail, we move to the next class, or if we are already in the last class, then we complete the course, isn't it? So same thing happens in our life as well. The training institute for us is ISKCON, which is where we are all admitted now. We have taken this course, sometimes Journey of Self-Discovery course or some Wisdom of Bhagavad Gita course that we have taken. And there are assignments, there are spiritual practices that we talk about during these courses, that we talk about to chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra every day. You eat only prasadam, you read Bhagavad Gita regularly. All these spiritual practices has to be done. And then exam, the paper is already leaked for this exam. It is not that we are going to suddenly give this question or that question. The question is simple, that at the time of death, can you remember Krishna? Only thing that is not known, the questions are known, answers are known, but the time of the exam is not known. It is a surprise exam. And the passing mark, generally in the material exam, sometimes it is 35%, 40%, 65%. But the passing mark for this exam is, unfortunately, is 100%. Even 99.99% is not good enough. You remember Krishna 99.99%, and you remember a gulab jamun, that 0.01%, finished, next life. You take a next life where you can eat the gulab jam, finish your thing, desires, and then again hope that next life you can become 100% Krishna conscious. If you fail, then you take animal life. And if you just steadily you have made some progress, you just remain in that human life. You go to the next semester. And if you have completed the course, that means you have got 100% marks, then you get liberated and you go to the spiritual world. So this is the exam that we have, that how to remember Krishna at the time of death. So what we can learn, okay, what we can learn is death is a surprise exam. Question paper, answer, result, everything is known, but the time is not known for this exam. And one who regularly studies will pass, but others who have got deviated from their study will fail. So we have to have this abhyasa, this regular study of regular practice of our sadhana, that chanting every day minimum 16 rounds of Hare Krishna Mahamantra, at least 15, 20 minutes, even more, if possible, half an hour, 1 hour, if you can read scriptures, nothing like it. eat only prasadam, do deity worship, and associate with devotees. If we do all of this, then we will make progress and then we will not get deviated. And this abhyasa is emphasized by Krishna again, like he has already mentioned that previously in the verses that we saw, but now he talks again in verse number 8. अभ्यासयोगयुक्तेन चेतसा नान्यगामिना परमं पुरुषं दिव्यं याति पार्थानुचिन्तयन्. Who wants to read?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, can I read?
Yes, Mataji, please go ahead. And Mahendra Prabhu, you can do the next one.
He who meditates on me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his mind constantly engaged in remembering me, undelayed from the path, he, O Partha, is sure to reach me. Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Undeviated, yeah, thank you, Mataji. Undeviated from the path, he, O Partha, is sure to reach me. So it has to be undeviated. So Abhyasa Yoga Yuktena. So it has to be Abhyasa Yoga. It has to be a practice. So practicing remembrance of Krishna throughout our life, then we can remember Krishna at the time of death. So that is what Krishna is saying. So what we can learn from this verse? So whatever we remember for the whole of our life, I'll make it bigger. So whatever we remember the whole of your life, that is what we'll remember at the time of death. And accordingly, we will get the next life. Hence, we have to remember Krishna every day, every moment, so that if any moment you die, then at that time, you would, because you are remembering Krishna, you will remember Krishna at the time of death. And thus, we will go back to the spiritual world. So this is the process. Antakalecha mameva, and because that antakal is not known to anyone when it is coming, so simple solution Krishna gives, you remember me anytime, every second. So if you remember me every second, so anytime you die, doesn't matter because you're remembering me, so you will come back to me. So this is the solution Krishna is giving to us. Now from 9 to 13 verses, Lord Shri Krishna is talking about Yoga Mishra Bhakti. How the yogis who are actually bhaktas who are mixing sometimes yoga into their practice, Ashtanga yoga in their practice, and how they are doing bhakti. We'll quickly run through this section and then we'll finish there. Verse number 9. 9. Kavim Puranam Anushasitaram Anoranim Raniyam Samanusmaretyah Sarvasya Dhataramachintya Rupam Aditya Varnam Tamasa Parastat. Yes, Mahendra Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Babuji.
Hare Krishna.
One should meditate upon the Supreme Person as the one who knows everything, as He who is the oldest, who is the controller, who is smaller than the smallest, who is the maintainer of everything, who is beyond all material conception, who is inconceivable, and who is always a person. He is luminous like the sun, and He is transcendental, beyond this material nature. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. So this practice of Yoga Mishra Bhakta has been mentioned here. And these Yoga Mishra Bhaktas, they have to meditate. They are meditating on Paramatma in their heart. And they meditate in different ways. So there are 10 different ways of meditating on this Paramatma is mentioned in this verse. So meditating on the Paramatma in different ways. So what are some of the ways which are mentioned? Kavi. Kavi means he's the knower of everything. He's the oldest. He's born, everyone is born out of him. He's the controller of everyone. He's the smaller than the smallest because it is mentioned, he's mentioned smaller than the smallest because he even enters the atoms. Each atom, the Paramatma enters, and that is how the atoms have this electron, neutrons, and whatever they are moving around. So all that energy is coming from the Supreme Lord himself. Then the fifth point is maintainer of everything. So that is one of the ways that they're thinking that this Paramatma is maintainer of everyone. And sixth is beyond all material conception. Seventh is he's achintya, he's inconceivable. You cannot think of it from your material mind and material senses. And eighth is he's always a person. Ninth is he is luminous like sun. And the 10th is he's transcendental beyond this material nature. So in different ways, these Yoga Mishra Bhaktas are thinking about the Paramatma in the heart. Let's look at verse number 10. Prayanakale manasachalena bhaktya yukto yoga balena chaiva bhruvormadhe pranamaveshya samyak satam param purusha mupaiti divyam. Yes, Pamendra Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Guruji, one question from last one, who is
Okay,
always
can we just
Sure.
read the translation, because I have just read the verse and I'll take your question after
Sure,
that.
Prabhuji. Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Do you want
One
to read
who-
the translation? Yeah.
Yes, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna Prabhuji. One who, at the time of death, fixes his life air between the eyebrows and by the strength of yoga, with an undeviating mind, engages himself in remembering the Supreme Lord in full devotion, will certainly attain to the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Yeah, so here it is mentioned that how practice of Shata Chakra Yoga is mentioned. So there are 6 chakras, and then the fixing the life air and how you can move it and then bring it to the in between the eyebrows, which is the Adya Chakra. So that is what is mentioned, the 6 chakras, and that if you read the purport, Srila Prabhupada talks about it more. So these Yoga Mishra Bhaktas, and all of these practices that which are mentioned in 9 to 13, they are not the end goal. They are just the means how we are chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. So the Yoga Mishra Bhaktas, they are actually trying to do various different ways, meditating on the Paramatma in different ways, or practicing Shatra Chakra Yoga, so that it will aid, it will help their meditation. That is why they are doing all of this. But finally, the most important thing is to remember Krishna, which we will come to verse number 13. What was your question, Prabhuji? Pamendra Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Prabhuji, it says who is always a person. So is it saying that recommending to worship Krishna as form of like individual?
Bhagavan.
Yep.
Yes. So that is what is mentioned, that Krishna is always a person. So the impersonal things, impersonal Brahman and whatever, it's just part of him that comes from him. And then further in the chapters, Krishna also mentions that specifically. But it is recommended to worship the Supreme Lord in a personal form. Okay. Let's read 11, 12, 13, and then we will quickly finish. Yadaksharam Vedavido Vadanti Vishanti Yadyatayo Vitaraga Yadichanto Brahmacharyam Charanti Tatte Padam Sangrahena Pravakshe. Yes, Gunjan Mataji, please go ahead.
Persons who are learned in the Vedas, who utter Omkara, and who are great sages in the renounced order, enter into Brahman. Desiring such perfection, one practices celibacy. I shall now briefly explain to you this process by which one may attain salvation. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mataji. So here, one of the other way of meditating of this Yoga Mishra Bhakta is mentioned, which is chanting Om. Okay, sir. Sarvadvarani Sanyamya Manohrudi Niruddhya cha Murdhya Dhayatmana Pranam Asthito Yoga Dharanam. So the process of Pratyahar has been mentioned here. Who wants to read? Pamendra Prabhuji, your hand is still up. Is that for reading or it is just from the past?
I can read it, Prabhu.
Okay, go ahead.
The yogic situation is that of the detachment from all the senses engagements, closing all the doors of the senses and fixing the mind on the heart and the life air at the top of the head. One establishes himself in yoga.
So we have seen this process of Pratyahar in the chapter 6. So this yogi is now renouncing all sense gratification, and especially sex life he's giving up. That was mentioned in 11 and 12 as well. And then he's trying to establish himself completely in yoga. Verse number 13. Om ittekaksharam brahma vyavaharan mamanusmaran yah prayati tyajan deham sayati paramam gatim. Someone else. Pamendra Prabhuji has read lots of verses already.
Hare Krishna,
Okay.
Prabhuji.
Aarti Mataji.
Hello. Hare
Hare
Krishna. Yeah.
Hare Krishna. Yeah,
After
please.
being After being situated in this yoga practice and vibrating the sacred syllable Om, the supreme combination of letters, if one thinks of the supreme personality of Godhead and quits his body, he will certainly reach the spiritual planets.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank
So, the most important part of all this process has been mentioned in this verse. And what is that? So one fixes fixed mind on heart, but the most important point is fixed mind in devotion to Supreme Personality of Godhead at death. So yogi is doing all of these things which are mentioned earlier, but main goal is to fix his mind in devotion on the Supreme Personality of Godhead so that he can remember him at the time of death. Okay, so this is where I wanted to finish. I know I have rushed through the last few verses, but that's okay. I think we are just talking about Yoga Mishra Bhakti, and we have talked about that before. So we'll stop here. Who wants to do either some summary points or some reflections, some question, comments?
Krishna Prabhu, I can give it a go if no one else.
Yeah, go for it, Prabhuji.
So
You
this
can mention 1 or 2 points and then leave for others some few other points.
okay, so Arjuna asked 5 things. I mean, but the one which I thought the main points from this is remembering God at the time of the death.
Yeah, he totally asked 8 questions, not 5. Yeah, 8 questions, yes.
So the main message from this chapter is to remember God at the time of the death, but we can only do it by constant remembrance of Him. And
Yes, absolutely. That is the most important point. Thank you, Prabhuji. Yes. Anyone else wants to mention any other reflections, comments, summary points?
Prabhu, Arjuna asked 8 questions from Krishna. Is Brahman self fruitive activity, material manifestation, demigods, adhiyagya, adhibhuta, and I forgot the last one, Prabhu. I did not.
Yeah, where does the adhyadnya stays, and where what? How should we remember Krishna at the time of death? Yes, that's right.
Thank you.
Yeah, Nimi Mataji, you had your hand up.
Yeah,
earlier.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. I think again to add over there, the more out of 8 questions, the important is we need to remember Krishna at the time of death, right? So all the 5 questions or the 6 questions were answered in 2 verses, and rest of the thing is about the 8th question. So very good example where why do we really need to remember Krishna at the time of death? We need to give an example of junction, and at that time I was thinking about our 10th board exam. So it doesn't matter that, for the final exam, you really need to study throughout the year. And then the answer you provided is, how we can remember Krishna at the time of the death is by always thinking of Krishna first throughout the life. I mean, throughout everything, and also by during all your activities. And how you can do is by putting your mind and intelligence, right? Because when we always think of body, by giving it the food, and again the food for the soul or the mind is by doing chanting. And the other thing is intelligence. Intelligence is all our scriptures, and you then talked about the 5 things, right? Which is prasadam is other thing, deity worship, and all those things.
Yes, very good. All right, thank you. And Aarti Mataji, your hand is still up. Was that for the reading earlier that you had raised, or is this for some other summary point that you want to mention, or some reflection that you have?
No, that was for the reading, Prabhuji. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Surananda Prabhuji.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Some reflections for me today. I learned definitions for Adhyatma, to serve the Supreme Lord. As I'm keep hearing this many times, people say like we are doing Adhyatmika Sangha, we are doing that, but yeah, actual meaning not known. So and the other one is karma. Any activity you do in this life, that is what it creates body of your next life. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Yeah, very good. Excellent. Any other reflections, comments? Yes, Nimi Mataji, you have another point to share.
Sorry, yeah. Again, adding to there that, again, what happens when you think of Krishna at the time of the death, and also what happens when you don't think of Krishna at the time of death, right? And there you give the example of Maharaj Bharat, right? Where you think of the deer, and at that time immediately I've thought of, that when you're working whole day again in the material life, when you're sleeping, and even in your dreams, you are thinking about your work, right? But when you and when you sleep, like after listening to this lecture, when you go to sleep, you're still thinking about it. So again, what you do consistently, I think what you said, it is not about doing it, but also consistently doing that is very important.
Yeah, well done. Okay, any further? Okay, Paminder Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. One thing I like to add, Prabhuji, based on your lecture is, we always think do the work and then to Krishna, but Krishna, as you mentioned, is like first think of Krishna and then do the work. So
Correct.
the order has been wrong, I guess, personally for me. So
Yeah,
that is
well
something
done. Good. And Sevakraj Prabhuji, Kalakali Mataji, I saw your hand up earlier.
Yeah, Prabhuji, I wanted to say on the exam questions being leaked out. And now I need to work on it, yes.
Yeah, the question and answer both are licked out. Just that
Exactly,
the
and it's
time is not told.
100% mark, a pass mark for that. Yeah, I like that.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Hare Krishna.
Okay, Hare Krishna. I think if nothing further, then we can stop here today, and we will continue on chapter 8 next week. Hare
Prabhuji,
Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. One last question, Prabhuji.
Oh, very last. It
Yeah,
came
very
at the last moment.
Yeah, you mentioned that we need to always remember Krishna.
Yeah.
So maybe it's a simple question. How we need to remember while sleeping, Prabhuji? Because it's
Yeah, good question, Prabhuji. How do you remember Krishna at the time of sleeping?
Yeah.
So, what it is mentioned is, Prabhuji, so there are two ways to answer this. Some basic thing is, so if even before sleeping, if you read something about Krishna, then it is possible that you can actually think about Krishna during sleep as well. So that is one simple answer.
Okay.
The other little bit more elaborate or little, okay, I'll give you that in brief only, but other answer is that if, say, suppose you are sleeping for 6 hours, but that sleeping for 6 hours is mainly for rejuvenating your body. Because if you do not sleep, you will become crazy.
Yeah.
So, how the sleep is used is to actually rejuvenate your body. So mainly it is for giving strength to your body. But what are you doing with your body for remaining 18 hours? If you have been actually using that for Krishna consciousness, then automatically that sleep also become Krishna conscious sleep, because you are trying to actually keep your body fit so that you can actually do, you can serve the Supreme Lord properly. So that is how, even if you don't remember Krishna while sleeping, if you are using that for having your body healthy, and when you are awake, if you are using your body for Krishna's service, that sleep also becomes Krishna conscious, Prabhuji.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Let us finish here. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.